I'm about as real as they come.
All my beats tailored by Joe. House Digital.
Maserati Rick in Detroit. Convertible bird in Miami. Graduated summa cum laude. Strip club made a tsunami. Carlton Hines with the ball game. Grateful Edmonds with the snowflakes. Craig Pettis in the M-Town. Sal Magluta with the boat game. Falcone with the cocaine. Like Freeway Ricky with the plug game. Like Monster Cody in South Central. Larry Davis from close range.
But it's litty again, I feel bad for my ops, most of them dead. Bitch boy, yeah, you put all them shots in my whip, but your man's got guy in the whip. Snitch boy, yeah, you told on J Money and Mook, so you know when I catch you it's lit.
Just remember my guys, my whatever. The glizzy on board, and if not, the Beretta.
Why y'all throw all them shots in his sweater? Cause he was a bitch, so my shotter got with him.
During the investigation, police and agents seized over 25 firearms, some of which you see here, including an AK-47. An additional 5 firearms, at last count, have been seized during search warrant executions today. This operation was intended to dismantle the NOB gang and take the most violent members of that gang off the street. The charging documents unsealed this morning summarize a litany of gang violence, from shootings and beatings to robberies, drug dealing, and prostitution. Moreover, violence and witness intimidation and the lack of a strong deterrent in our state courts has emboldened the NOB gang, leading its members to explicitly threaten rival gangs over social media and actively plan retaliatory violence, including murder. For example, the charges allege that defendant Michael Brandeo has committed multiple crimes for NOB as a juvenile and as an adult. He has produced numerous rap recordings and videos openly discussing these activities. In them, Brandeo declares that he is a leading member of NOB and has committed multiple shootings and murders on behalf of the group. Dismantling violent gangs is a top priority of the Justice Department, something we will continue to pursue using the RICO statute and other tools at our disposal.
This morning are the culmination of a multi-state, multi-agency investigation that began over a year ago, focusing on one of the most dangerous and violent street gangs in Massachusetts.
This operation was intended to dismantle the NOB gang and take the most violent members of that gang off the street.
31 members and associates of Dorchester-based NOB street gang are now facing federal charges. Some were arrested this morning during raids in various parts of the state, including this scene in Attleboro. Others were already in custody for other offenses.
The charging documents unsealed this morning summarize a litany of gang violence, from shootings and beatings to robberies, drug dealing, and prostitution.
Many of those arrested are repeat offenders, with criminal records dating back to when some were as young as 14 years old. In fact, a couple of them were wearing GPS bracelets while committing their alleged crimes.
During a press conference this morning, law enforcement officials stood before 2 tables of firearms that were seized, including an AK-47. The U.S. Attorney and Boston Police Commissioner say this simply had to be a federal case.
State-level charges and state-level penalties, at least for this group, was not enough of a deterrent. And so sometimes you need the feds to be more of a deterrent.
I am glad this is going federal. I don't expect to see these individuals out on the street the next day wearing a bracelet.
Now, according to the criminal complaint, this group is connected to at least 3 separate murder cases dating back to 2017. And at least one gang member not only participated in a lot of these violent crimes, but later rapped about it, too.
And gang members pulled off the streets. Federal prosecutors say they're connected to crimes all over the state. Let's get to WBZ's Christina Hager, who has more on this big arrest. Christina?
Well, David, according to the FBI, this bust spans across towns like Attleboro, Weymouth, Brockton, Providence, even as far as Maine and Connecticut. But most of the alleged crimes happened right here in Boston. Yellow tape and police here on Wheatland Street in Dorchester.
There were 5 shootings in Boston this past Saturday alone, one of them a homicide.
Now, U.S. Attorney Andrew Lelling says FBI, ATF, and police just put a dent in the recent gang violence, confiscating dozens of guns, issuing warrants on 32 people, nearly half of whom they arrested today.
That is engaged in murder, armed robbery, armed assault, witness intimidation, sex trafficking, various firearms crimes, and drug trafficking.
We have your back. Even in a time of anti-police sentiment, we will do our jobs.
At the very same time, Boston Police Commissioner William Gross went on the defense.
Being committed to
Boston's ACLU was on Zoom, discussing the creation of law enforcement certification to promote police reform.
We see regularly intakes about racial profiling, about improper stops and seizures, as well as police brutality and then officer-involved violence that results in death.
But Gross defended the number of police stops in minority neighborhoods and criticized the state court's use of GPS ankle bracelets, saying many of those arrested in this sweep were wearing them.
For God's sakes, they have plenty of opportunities. This isn't their first time on the merry-go-round. But today, the buck stopped here. Today, in the federal system, they will be held accountable.
And U.S. Attorney Lelling said recent calls to defund police are, in his word, ridiculous. He said today's sweep shows that a well-funded police department should not be considered optional, but necessary. In Boston, Christina Hager, WBZ.
NOB is an abbreviation for Norton, Olney, Barry, Streets, and Dorchester. The gang is associated with the older Wendover gang, which has been involved in violent feuds with rival gangs in the Boston area for over 20 years. This case was investigated by the Boston Police Department, the ATF, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, the FBI, the Massachusetts State Police, Randolph Police Department, Stoughton Police Department, Quincy Police.
Yo, we back. It's your boy Popalot. Mobb ties. We on our way to Massachusetts with it. Boston. Dorchester. Y'all ever been around here? I have. Be careful. Now, today we are going to be covering who authorities claim to be one of the most violent gangs in the Boston area over the last 20 years. And upon doing my research, I pretty much seen exactly that. And I'm going to try to break down the history behind pretty much not only this indictment, but a preceding indictment in 2008 that involves the people that we're going to be covering today. But the main focus of the episode that we're going to be covering today is going to be two gentlemen, one by the name of Michael Brando, better known as G. Fredo, and another gentleman by the name of Kelvin Barrios, aka 7981 Cal. Now, the reason that we're going to highlight them is because in this in this most recent indictment, they were the main ones. It looked like that they were targeted by the government. And like I said, based on my research, I found that this is a lot deeper than them. The government is going to go on to make this kind of maybe like a I don't want to say like a YouTube trial, really, because with a lot of these cases that we cover, we notice a lot of people will put their stuff on the internet. They'll leave internet paper trails. They won't be like technically a paper trail, but anything you put on the internet is going to leave some kind of trace or trail. And when you detailing crimes, that's just going to make the government's case all the more easier, really. If you just look at it, it's kind of common sense. But hopefully a lot of the things that these guys was detailing were not actual facts. They were not actually in the process of doing it. The government are going to try to tie them to look like several, well, I want to say 2 murders, because they mention murders like it's a litany of them, but I did see where they spoke about 2 murders that occurred in Boston and Brockton, and we're going to get into those. But according to court documents, they're going to say that since the summer of 2019, federal and local authorities have been investigating the NOB. which is an abbreviation for Norton, Only, and Barry. Now, they primarily run in the streets of Dorchester. NOB is associated with a long-standing Westover street gang, and that's going to be very important because we're going to get into that. Now, it's alleged that through the racketeering conspiracy, members and associates of NOB were involved in a range of criminal activity, including murders, attempted murders, armed robberies, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and illegal firearm crimes. Now, while the gang is based in Brockton, they say their criminal activities spanned all across the city of Massachusetts, the state of Massachusetts, from Randolph, New Bedford, Stockton, Brockton, East Bridgewater, Taunton, even Cape Cod, and it goes as far as Rhode Island, Maine, and Connecticut. Now, they're going to say over the last 4 years, it's alleged that the NOB members and associates have committed multiple murders and shootings, many of which targeted rival street gang members, particularly members from the Cameron Street Gang. They're going to say they're another Boston-based street gang. Now, for example, it's alleged that in February 2020, that's where the 2 murders that we spoke of, authorities are going to say had been committed. They're going to say the twin brother of the victim in the Brockton murder had been shot and killed in July 2019 in Boston. And in a recorded jail call, one of the NOB members could be recorded remarking that the gang's rivals were dropping like flies. And now during that period of time, gang members and associates were involved in thefts of motor vehicles. They're going to say some of those motor vehicles were used to commit crimes against the other gangs. So the first thing we thinking is drive-bys and attacks. They're going to say one of them resulted in the kidnapping of a 5-year-old female from Boston that was later abandoned in Randolph. Now, that's just kind of the more recent indictment. When we get into the charges, it's going to be 31 members look like they were charged. Now, in the first, and this is important, I always kind of look at this. When the Justice Department releases their press release or their press brief on the specific case, I always look to see who's the first names that they mention. And in this case, the first names mentioned 1 and 2 is going to be Michael Brando and Kelvin Barrios, aka G Fredo, Frizz Block Fredo, and aka Cal or 7981 Cal. And G Fredo's charges are going to be, he's going to be charged with the RICO, which is both of them are charged with that, and almost everybody in the case. Conspiracy to distribute controlled substances and possession with the intent to distribute controlled substances, and their charges are going to mirror each other, almost similar to the Bobby Smurda Rowdy Rebel situation. And when they mention that that this goes back to a feud in Westover, based on all accounts, it looks like both of their families are entrenched in this feud from the beginning, and it's crazy how. Now, according to authorities, they're going to say in the early 1990s, a guy by the name of Augusto Gus Lopez, his younger brother Nardo Lopez, and another guy by the name of Bobby Mendez belonged to a group whose activities centered around Westover Street in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. Now, in 1995, Nardo Lopez was charged with the murder of Mendez, and then he fled Boston. Now, Gus Lopez, who was in prison at the time of the killing, vowed to eliminate any potential witnesses to his brother's crime, to exact revenge on members of the Westover group who remained sympathetic to Mendez and who harassed Lopez's relatives. Now, after his release from prison, Gus Lopez became close to a guy by the name of Armando Manny Materio. Now, he's a very, very important person in the case because he seemed like he links almost the two groups when I go through the indictment, because this information is based on an indictment in 2008, so almost a decade ago. Now, they're going to say Montero is the cousin of an individual. Pretty much, he's going to be actually the cousin of Augusto Lopez, if I'm not mistaken. Now, in 1997, he introduced Lopez to a pre-existing group that had problems with the guys from Westover. They ain't gonna say Lopez joined this group, and they gonna name them the Stonehurst group, and they're gonna say they're named after a street in Dorchester called Stonehurst Street. Now, Lopez and Montero became leaders of that particular group, and they went on numerous missions to hunt down and shoot members of Westover. Westover members did the same, and they're going to say that those shootings reached the apex from around 1998 to 2000. But as we see, almost 20 years later, from where they said they reached the apex, it looks like it was at an all-time high, and it's sunk in. It's still sinking in people from the city and both families, because even in those indictments, a lot of the people had the same last names, 31 people. So it's a lot of people to go through, but it's online, it's public information. Y'all can look it up. It's very, very crazy. What I had a problem with was gauging the popularity of G, Fredo, and Cal in the city. So anybody from Boston tuned in, anybody tapped into the local scene, or even if they national, if you're in another city and you was bumping them, y'all let me know. Y'all make sure y'all get in the comment box. If y'all rapping, y'all make sure y'all do not put the activities that y'all currently doing online. If it's murder, it's no statutory, no limited statutations on that shit, man. Let's just keep that shit quiet, bro. Now, y'all already know what it is, man. Y'all follow me on Instagram, Twitter. It's your boy Popalot, POP_A_LOT. We're going to be back with some more real trill spill shit. Y'all already know how it is. Y'all already know how we rocking. Hit the bell right under this video to know when it's coming back. It's the Mobb, man. Mobb ties.